The Asia Banks Association brings together banks and the banking community in discussing various topics on opportunities and present issues facing banks in Asia and beyond. Temenos is a leading provider of banking technology in Asia and around the world. My name is Imran, and I will be your moderator today. I'm based out of Sri Lanka, and I run the Temenos business across the subcontinent. The topic of serving customers using digital as a key channel has now risen to the top of the agenda as a result of evolving customer expectations and increased digital penetration. The COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated this trend as enforced digital transitions have embedded an immediate impetus for change. These drivers will see Asia's digital banking opportunity expanding significantly in the coming years, reflecting a trend which has seen over 200 new digital banks established globally over the last decade. Since 2015, the number of digital banks has grown to close to 200%, supported by significant investment and positive and evolving regulation. Institutional banks are now facing a new era of digital-first competition. Customers looking for more personalized and targeted offerings are turning away from incumbent operators towards new breed of digital-first challenges. A few housekeeping rules before we start off. Nick, if we can move to the next session, next slide. Today's webinar is scheduled to last 60 minutes. All participants will be muted to enable the presenter to present without interruption. Questions can be submitted via the Q&A box, which you see at the bottom of your screen. The recording of the session will be made available approximately in 2 days after we conclude. We'd love to know how you felt about the session. Give us your feedback at the end of the session using the link that is provided. Given the significant opportunity for digital, which is clearly visible in Asia, next, if you can move on to the next slide. How can banks restructure their digital and technology strategy to deliver superior digital experiences? How can banks become digital? How can banks overcome digital fatigue in delivering world-class digital experiences for customers? To discuss this topic today, I have the pleasure of introducing Nick Edwards, Head of Distribution across APAC at Temenos, and Dilshan Rodrigo, Chief Operating Officer of Hatton National Bank in Sri Lanka. Let me kick off this session by inviting Nick to share a few thoughts on this topic based on his experience and observations in working with banks in Asia. Nick, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Imran. And sorry, I was a bit slow on the take up on some of those slide transitions. I was having a few little heartache moments on my end. But it's an absolute pleasure to open up proceedings today and help frame the conversation leading into the fireside chat with Dilshan, myself, and Imran. And in so doing, I represent Temenos Infinity. Temenos Infinity is a suite of tools that can transform a bank's digital banking customer experiences and the processes that support those experiences. In my job and in our team's job, we speak with a lot of banks throughout our region and throughout the world. And there's something that we always find interesting in those conversations. You know, every bank wants to change, but not every bank does change or is as effective in implementing that change as other banks. And that's really where the genesis of the topic for today's session came out of. Is your bank experiencing digital fatigue? How you can power through the noise to be the best digital version of yourself. And so with that, it really begs the question, what do we mean when we say digital fatigue? Well, you know, naturally, fatigue is a reaction to constant effort and pressure to achieve an outcome, that repetitive stress or repeated variations of the stress and the impact that can have at an organizational level, at an individual level, at a cultural level, or at a technological level. And let's face it, our industry is obsessed with change. Our industry is obsessed with digital transformation. We are undergoing a monumental shift and rotating out of our traditional branch-based distribution model into a broad-based adoption of the new growing channels in our industry, digital channels, and in particular, the mobile channel. We are breaking down banks' processes and we are rebuilding them with a whole new objective in mind. But the interesting thing here is that there's a strong dichotomy that exists between that massive opportunity, that pot of digital gold that we all seek, and the reasons why banking is hard to change. You know, we operate in the most regulated industry on the planet. Regulation can be a barrier to innovation. We're going to talk a little bit more today about that. And in particular, we want to talk about the next big anchor on innovation, which is legacy, how the decisions of the past can impact a bank's ability to innovate today. And this is a really key topic and one which is endemic within our industry today. And so to kind of lift the story on a little bit, I want to tell you a personal story. This is a story about a bank that has powered through the noise to become the best digital bank that they can be. And I'm not talking about National Australia Bank today because they're a Temenos customer, although they are. I'm talking about National Australia Bank today because this is my bank. This is my bank in Australia. I have banked with National Australia Bank my entire life. And in the job that I do now, I can reflect on my own personal transition in my relationship with my bank and understand just what a change journey that bank has been through. And so I remember when I only used to conduct my banking at a branch. I remember when I was scared to put $20 into an ATM because I was worried that that money would get lost. I remember when I only used internet banking to look at an inquiry because I didn't trust the technology in the internet that if I made a transfer, that money would actually go to where I meant it to go. But now I only bank on my mobile phone. Occasionally I call a call center. Very occasionally I go to a branch. And when I reflect upon my own change in behaviors over the course of the last decade or 15 years, perhaps a bit longer, you can reflect very quickly on just how much change the bank has been through. And it's not just my changing behaviors, it's all of my friends, it's all of the other people in Australia. And Australia is just a small example of a monumental shift that is happening throughout the world, and in particular throughout the APAC region. So NAB. NAB is a big bank. It's 800 billion in assets, 41st largest bank in the world. They have millions of customers. They're a universal bank. They have over 1,500 branches. So they were a very heavily invested branch distribution model. What makes their journey astounding, and I'll provide you some facts and figures in a moment, but what makes their journey astounding is that they've been hugely successful at rotating out of this traditional branch-based model. They announced to the market recently that 94% of their customer touchpoints are digital. 94%. You know, what underpins that is a huge shift in the organization. In fact, part of that announcement, NAB was saying that 80% of their staff actually don't speak to a customer day in, day out. So they have 35,000 staff. Only 7,000 of their staff are actually engaging in a direct sense with their customer base. This is a monumental shift. So a couple of stats to back this up, and frankly, you can write a thesis about this picture, but what it says in essence is that in the grey, we see a declining transactional volume via the internet channel, and in the red, you see the mobile channel growing from what was a fairly small base into the largest portion of banking transactions in the bank today. You could overlay this with a steep decline in the use of the branch channel for consumers and banking customers to conduct their transactions. So what this says in one picture is that mobile is the only growing channel in banking. And this is a fact globally. Our industry is facing this monumental shift and we need to get behind it to win. And speaking of winning and growing, of course, NAB's product distribution model was based around retail branch-based origination of products. So 10 years ago, it was the only way they originated products. Today, only 1/3 of their new product sales is coming through that bricks and mortar and phone center, call center channel. 2/3 of their new product origination is coming via online means. This is a massive cultural shift in how you conduct your business as a bank. It's a technological shift and a process shift, but it is a massive cultural shift as well. And I don't want to make it sound like this has been easy, because the change at NAB has been hard. To underline this point, I want to just kind of put my finger on a couple of key numbers around the legacy constraints that the bank runs today. So the bank today has 2,000 applications which they need to keep the lights on. 2,000. Those applications are run in 30 different development languages. It is a hugely complex operating environment. There is always a reason not to make a change. And yet, the National Australia Bank has powered through that complexity to be the best version of the digital bank that they can be today. And I want to just change tack a little bit here. I want to, often digital is related to technology. I want to talk about digital as it pertains to people, and in particular, bank staff. Because digital transformation can be scary. People fear that they will lose their jobs. People fear that their jobs will change. And in fact, that has happened at National Australia Bank. They've gone through an organisational rotation of skills out of their direct channels and into a more digitally skilled employee base. There have been some people that lost their jobs through this process. But where National Australia Bank is in terms of their digital transformation is about embracing their staff, investing in digital technologies to make their staff's life better. This is a snapshot from their most recent annual report, and it gives you a very high-level view on how the bank tells their own story. I'm going to call out two things here, and it's a nuanced approach that I want to call out. Here, they call out who we are here for. The first people that they underscore is their staff. The second people that they underscore is their customers. How do they measure their success? Well, actually, they measure their success in terms of staff engagement first, then customer engagement second, and then the financial metrics third. It's a small, nuanced change in how they represent themselves internally and to the market. But this is based on the belief that where NAB is in terms of their digital transformation, by improving their employees' working lives through investments in digital technologies, this will deliver sustainable results for the bank. And of course, with National Australia Bank, as you would expect, the change continues at scale. There are quite literally dozens of digital change initiatives which are going on at any one point in time. And I want to kind of emphasize that level of change and that level of pace of change is really hard to do when faced with the kind of legacy constraints that the bank was facing or is facing. To manage that change at scale, I wanted to present to you an idea. And this is not Nick's idea. This is not Temenos' idea. This is an idea by Gartner. It's called pace layers. And to help frame up your thinking about Gartner's pace layers, I want to pose two questions to you. The first question is, as a bank, should you treat every project with the same, potentially slow project processes and methods? So should you treat every project the same? The second question that I would pose to you is the IT organization the best center within the bank to deliver innovation? The IT organization often has 80% of their budget going towards BAU, keeping the lights on, maintaining the existing systems, and other major system implementation. These are huge focus areas. Is that the right area to incept innovation, rapid innovation within your organization? And so with those thoughts, Gartner has proposed a tiered approach to change within an organization. This isn't just about banking, mind you. This is about organizations, technology-heavy organizations, but is very relevant for banking. At the base level, Gartner talks about your systems of record. These are your established major transaction processing systems, your housing of your critical master data within your enterprise. They're often subject to regulatory requirements. And as a result, you actually don't necessarily want to change these systems that much. They have a long life cycle because of that. Then above that are your systems of differentiation. These are your systems and applications that enable unique, either industry-specific or company-specific capabilities to be brought to bear. They have a medium-term life cycle, so 1 to 5 years. And what's really important in these systems is that they are able to be configured frequently to enable an institution, a bank or an organization to take advantage of thematic changes in the bank's operating environment. And then finally, a system of innovation. These are new applications that can be built in, say, 2 weeks to maximum a year that are there specifically to take advantage of point opportunities, to defend against point challenges, or to exploit a specific new innovation requirement that is relevant in the industry. So for example, eKYC. And so what Gartner says is through a stratified approach to how you manage change within your organization, you can actually maintain your legacy applications. You can maintain your systems of record, which aren't actually designed to be changed that much, at the same time as enabling your bank's teams to exploit in a rapid sense the kind of business and technology innovation that our industry, and more to the point, our customers demand. And it's good to know, this is absolutely not a product pitch, but it's good to know that there are vendors that are enabling customers, banking customers, to take on this kind of change with a stratified approach to different changes or paces of change within your organization. And Temenos is absolutely one of those organizations. And so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to hand over to Dilshan in a moment. There's one thing I didn't mention in my presentation, which is, bringing this back to where I started. In our conversations and the banks that tend to execute change more effectively, one of the common factors in those institutions is there's always a strong vision, strong leadership that is able to set the path for the organization over the next 5 or 10 years. It is a super critical success factor in digital transformation to have really strong leadership. And that's a really good segue into introducing Dilshan. So Dilshan, as Imran said earlier, he is the Chief Operating Officer of Hatton National Bank. Hatton National Bank is one of the largest private sector banks in Sri Lanka. Dilshan is overlooking all of the support functions of that bank. He has a number of directorships in the subsidiaries and also the Sri Lankan Credit Bureau. And why we think he's a really relevant person to talk about digital transformation and powering through the noise is because he's, in particular, played a catalyst role in the digital transformation, ongoing digital transformation of HNB. So he's been a driving force towards centralization of some functions, automation of other functions, outsourcing where appropriate, and breaking down and rebuilding the bank's processes in support of better customer outcomes. He holds an MBA from Cranfield University and also is a fellow of CIMA. And I'd really like to welcome Dilshan, who's going to present to us on a little bit about the HNB story, and then we're going to go into the fireside chat. So I will just change slides here quickly and bring up your slides, Dilshan. Over to you. You may need to come off mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you very much for the introduction, and also thank you, Imran, for inviting me to this session. I was inspired to hear Nicholas's presentation about the National Australia Bank and the very interesting progress they have achieved on the digital transformation. And I'm here to share with you HNB's journey. So this is a journey that started almost 8 years back as part of our strategy sessions. That's the story I would like to tell you. It's very much a journey that is where there is a destination which is far ahead. We are very much steeped into it, as Nicholas mentioned, in terms of a lot of initiatives that have taken place. But first, let me set the stage by very quickly maybe taking a couple of seconds to talk about HNB. HNB is the one of the largest private commercial banks in Sri Lanka. We are a mass market bank. We have a very strong presence in retail. We internally, joke when we say we are a cradle to grave bank, meaning we deal with customers from all walks of life, across all life cycles. Then we have a range of businesses we deal with, starting from microfinance to the small and medium scale sector, project finance, middle market or emerging corporates, large corporates, and we also have a reasonable overseas presence as well. We serve over 2 million customers and over 200,000 businesses around the country, and we have 250 branches spread across the country. So after the two state banks that account for something like 60% of the market share, we are one of the largest private banks operating here, one of the top 1,000 banks in the world. So I usually present this particular slide every year at my branch managers conference, just to re-emphasize to everyone that this is an organization-wide transformation. You need to change everything you believe in from the very bottom, from the core. So as a bank with a 130-year-old history, a very traditional bank, this means a lot, and it means a huge commitment on the part of the leadership as well as a team across the 5,000 staff members who are our associates in this change journey. Next slide, Nick.
Just a moment.
Please move to the next slide. Yeah.
There we go.
So this is an important slide because in 2013, when we made a commitment to drive this digital transformation, one of the first things that we agreed on is that the business model needs to change. And that required a complete overhaul, a complete rethinking of the business model, which is really to move our branches across the 250 that we have into showrooms, and then take a lot of the back office processing activities into the center. And that is what we refer to internally as the hub and spoke model. So branches, which were mini banks in the respective regions, became more marketing, networking, sales, and advisory units. And we set up 6 large central units comprising operations, credit, contact center, collections, various areas that were brought to the center to manage a lot of the volumes, a lot of the back office work that was done in the branches to the center. And we backed ourselves during that time by freezing headcount, recruitment of headcount, as well as opening of new branches for a 4-year time horizon. And we were the only bank to make that bold move. And that really signaled the seriousness in which the leadership was driving the digital transformation journey. We also moved into a paperless office. So not only credit, which is the lifeblood of the business, but even our all our internal correspondence, our internal approvals, board meeting minutes, board discussion, agendas, all of it became electronic. And we now run almost a fully paperless office, with the exception of maybe a few areas like legal documentation and customer statement, where part of it is still manual or documented, but most of it is now driven on e-statements. Then along with that, in parallel, we drove the entire digital products, and that's what Nicholas was talking about, the entire suite of digital products to support the journey. And probably the most important thing to really sustain this journey and also manage the fatigue that comes with the 8-year journey is the open communications and the process of building collaborative decisions. So engagement with the unions, engagement with the change management teams, the top 100, bringing in informal as well as formal ways of communicating. WhatsApp became a very important tool for us to communicate with our staff across the board and make sure that very quickly we are able to convey, address issues on the run, as it were, to enable this transformation to take place. The next slide will basically show you the sheer range of the kind of activities we did on the centralization front, on the automation front, outsourcing, and the process improvement. So these are just a snapshot of the type of initiatives. So a lot of centralization took place. Today we have about 1/4 of our staff operating in centralized centers, and they don't look like banks. They look like they look very different. They look like knowledge processing centers. These, are working on turnaround times, SLAs, skill staff for activities. And that is the focus in terms of really managing the internal customer service to the branches. So they've taken a whole load of work that was previously managed by branches and also given us the peace of mind in terms of ensuring standardization and the process effectiveness of what they are doing. Automation, again, a lot of work on the reconciliations front, charges automation, driving the paperless office and e-statements. On the outsourcing, the ATM management and the loading and unloading, the whole process is outsourced. We have a full range of electronic point of sale machines, as well as our ATMs and the CDMs, recyclers, almost 700 units, which make self-service possible to a large extent. Then also on the process improvement, a lot of work happened in terms of continuous work in terms of lean management, online training, so that we don't have to rely on the workshop physical learning portals. We now deal completely on an online learning portal, which we call Talent Space, which engages with our staff around the country. So a lot of work in the process improvement side, particularly now at this moment in time, there's a lot of traction on RPAs, chatbots, driving that initiative across the bank, particularly in the centralized centers, to get more efficiency. And my last slide, Nick, is basically the whole digital suite. So we started our internet and mobile banking almost 8 years back. So they have evolved into new versions now. We have a mobile wallet, which we introduced last year. We are also embarking on cash management on the corporate banking side. So that's another important activity in terms of bringing our businesses together across the supply chain. And also the social media banking. So all these, the suite of digital products, getting our staff to embrace that and really drive it with our customers is a key priority. And that is really what is work in progress at the moment. So I think I probably set the stage. I promised Nick that I won't take more than 10 minutes. I think I've probably done better than that. So I'm now ready for more discussion and questions.
Thank you, Dilshan. Thank you for sharing your insights at HNB. Nick, as always, a very personalized experience in terms of what you want to see from banks in terms of digital experiences. We move on to the fireside chat. Do send us your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will also be rewarding you with a $50 Amazon voucher for some of the questions you asked. Our marketing team will contact the winners before the end of next week. Stay tuned to the Temenos LinkedIn channel to find out the winners. Welcome again, Nick and Dilshan. Thank you once again for some interesting thoughts and ideas in terms of what banks are doing and what banks should do. Nick, let me start off with you. You made a very interesting comment. All banks want to change, but not all banks implement change. A leading question from there. Most digital transformation projects are expensive and complex. And that's probably one of the reasons why banks don't change as fast as they would like to. How should banks manage this? How should banks manage this complexity in enabling new and innovative digital experiences for their customers?
Okay, it's it's super hard to answer that, and I don't think there's one right answer. What I would say is this, and where we see actually let's talk about what change actually means, and you know, there's a spectrum of change, and on that spectrum you can have small incremental change and you can have big bang change. Now, where we see banks being most effective is small incremental change over a large area of their estate. You know, it's not every day that a bank is, in fact, it's rare that a bank is going to rip and replace systems. You know, these days, each individual system is so heavily integrated into the fabric of how a bank operates. It is incredibly complex to change systems. So what's really happening on the ground is around incremental change on top of each of those individual areas of focus. Now, the trick in this, and where this gets more complex, is to try and prevent further legacy in those decisions. So often, in particular with regards, you know, we see throughout the region, banks coming to their, you know, broadly the end, in inverted commas, of their first generation digital technologies. And those technologies have been put in place, been integrated into the bank, and then they've been customized to a point where they actually become inflexible. And so maybe at some point then a rip and replace strategy becomes relevant. But generally speaking, where we see the most effective change regimes, it's picking areas, biggest bang for buck areas, and going after those with incremental changes. And then that's your starting point. And then you figure out, what is my strategy? What are the big building blocks that I need to change to achieve that? And I'm sure, you know, Dilshan highlighted some pretty big building blocks in the HMB story that would have resulted in fairly major changes within the organization. But you need to, in my opinion, you need to be a little bit careful of just how much of those big building blocks you change at any one point in time. Maybe that's a, sorry Imran, I think you're on mute, but maybe that's a good segue to Dilshan as well for his thoughts.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point.
Yeah, connected to you as well.
Sorry, Imran.
Yeah, so maybe Dilshan, let me set the context. Connected question. Can you guys hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So large bank, one of the largest banks in the country, 2 million customers, 100,000 businesses. Usually the larger the bank, larger the complexity, right? Introducing new systems at a bank can be challenging. Many legacy systems to deal with, countless number of integrations to evaluate. How did HNB go about this? What were the challenges?
So Imran, I mean, I'm not going to make any comments about it. It's a very tough thing, you know, and starting early was probably our biggest strength, because we made a commitment and we recognized the need for digital transformation in 2013. And you all understand that, you know, transforming an organization is not really about incremental change. It's really about transformation. And that's in an environment where we have a lot of challenges in terms of managing the business, you know, transforming from within brings with a lot of challenges. So I used to use the example, how do you change the tires of a car that's going at 60 miles an hour? So that really is the magnitude and the challenge that is confronting most people. It's been tough. We've had our own heartaches, we've had our disappointments, but overall, I think the organization has evolved significantly as a result of the strategies that we put in place, particularly the systematic approach, the disciplined approach in which we went in. But first, in terms of building the enabling environment to effect the digital products. I think that has been a key point because many people associate change with introducing the digital products, bringing in the wallets, bringing in the internet banking, mobile banking, all the technology stuff. But before that comes in, you need to first work on your business model. If you don't have the right people selling it and the right level of literacy in your staff, particularly at the branches who are really engaging with these 2 million customers on a day-to-day basis, having the who have initially embraced the digital, as well as having the time and effort to focus on sales, then it's not possible for you to really be able to, automate yourself out of a problem. So that enabling work that we did in terms of taking a lot of back office work out of the branches, bringing it into the center, and then bringing in skilled staff, specialized staff, standardization, SLAs in the center to support the branches. When you relieve them from the back office operations work, they have more time to really engage with customers with the digital products you offer to effect the kind of traction and the growth that you can achieve. And a case in point there is that if you look at the spike post-COVID, I mean, we've been in a COVID environment now for almost a year. This is our third wave, and we are in the midst of a third wave right now. So over the last year, there have been many times where schools, offices have been closed due to lockdowns, and also a culture where a lot of people are working from home. So that has resulted in a huge spike in our digital volume. So I think there is a, there is a meme or a joke that's going around saying that with all the efforts that have been made by the CIOs, the CEOs, and the consultants over the years, nothing has beaten the efforts that COVID-19 has made on digital transformation. So that's really true for us. I mean, we've seen a spike of maybe 200, 300% increase in volumes, and so many first-time adopters who've come in, and they've begun to trust the digital channels that we are offering now. And that trust was something that took a long time to build. But now I think necessity is the mother of invention. So many people have really into that. And now the challenge is really for us to support that traction. So, and also build the e-commerce around it. And that's another area for us has been a very important factor. We have really looked at supporting our businesses during this time of need, help them in the visioning, the supply chain linkages, and the enabling technology for them to really be able to buy their groceries, buy their overall requirements through the digital infrastructure that is provided. I mean, for the last 6 months, I have been buying my own groceries on my wallet, from a farm 120 kilometers from where I stay. In a matter of seconds every week, I get my vegetables, my fruits, farm fresh, delivered to my doorstep. And that's the e-commerce that we managed to really build, that ecosystem that has really supported our 100,000 businesses and many others to be able to sustain themselves in this environment. And what really drives us is really making a difference in the lives of these people. Ultimately being a true partner in progress and supporting that overall transformation for them.
Dilshan, you spoke about internet banking and mobile banking. But the truth of the matter is that internet banking and mobile banking has been in the agenda of many banks even before COVID. So during COVID, what new digital experiences have become more relevant than conventional internet banking or mobile banking? What did HNB do different during this phase?
So I think a couple of things. Foremost amongst that is to really relook at our entire customer journey. I mean, look at the customer journey from an end-to-end perspective, from the onboarding process to adoption. How do you make that whole process digital? There have been instances where part of it was not digitalized. So that was a challenge for us. It doesn't make any sense for a new customer to come to a branch and give us a physical form to get into digital. So those kinds of areas we've really strengthened so that we can ensure that the entire experience is end-to-end digital. So that really helped us in terms of the adoption rates. Then we also invested about 3 years ago, fortunately, in a contact center, and that operates 24/7. So as a result of that, a lot of the work that was, in terms of customer inquiries, balance inquiries, that, used to take a lot of our time of our branches are now being managed through the contact center. We have a missed call alert, which is a very simple, a solution. It does not even need an introduction, but that managed to maybe take 90% of the traffic out of our branches because now customers have the ability to, get their account balances through this feature. So these kinds of things really supported us. Then also we brought in the mobile ATMs, where particularly for people living in areas where the branches are dispersed, we take our bank to their doorstep, so they can withdraw money, be able to do some of their basic transactions because the ATMs are brought to their doorstep. And that also applies to the apartment people living in apartments, flats, and so on. So that is a big convenience for them. Then another area is, of course, like I mentioned earlier, very important area is about building that e-commerce platform, bringing a marketplace together, bringing our own customer, identifying our own customers and finding ways to link them up, corporates with microfinance, SMEs with transporters, so that they are able to support each other. When traditional supply chains broke up as a result of COVID, even people who were exporting suddenly found themselves unable to export because some of their customers overseas were impacted by COVID. So we were able to support them by identifying households in Sri Lanka, get them to sell directly to the customer or sell their produce directly to retailers by creating supply chain linkages. So these were some of the areas in which HNB was able to really support our customers during this time.
Thank you. Nick, I got a question for you. You obviously work with banks, right from Sri Lanka, right up to Australia and everything in between. In your opinion, what differentiates the best of banks that offer world-class digital experiences versus the ones that do not?
Yeah, another really good question. And this is absolutely market specific. So I think the answer in Australia is different to the answer in Sri Lanka, and the answer in Sri Lanka is different to the answer in, say China. And so for me, I think about it in terms of 3 parts, really. The first part is, what is the user experience? What is that emotional connection that a customer is going to have with the UI of either the internet banking or the mobile banking app that they're interfacing in? The third part of it is, what are the bank processes that support those experiences? Because we know that, in my past, I worked for a pure-based, purebred, born in the cloud fintech around digital customer acquisition, digital customer onboarding. I can tell you it takes 15 minutes to apply for a loan on a mobile phone. But then it takes 2 weeks for me to get a letter back in the post telling me that I've been accepted for that loan, but on a revised set of terms. That's not a digital experience at all. And actually, I think that that's the hardest part in all of this, is to match bank processes to digital customer expectations. Because digital customer expectations aren't governed by heavily regulated credit processes around how much money we can lend you or not lend you, you know, and that's really big. And then the third bucket of things is, what are all the other services that are available in my market which I can bring together to make my customers' experience better? And this can be everything from an eKYC, selfie verification experience. It can be, how can I aggregate all of my financial view into one app? It can be all sorts of weird and wonderful things around loyalty or e-commerce or additional services that I can access through my app. And so, you know, for me, I think I kind of bring that back to the original point of the question is, what makes a good experience? I would say the most important part is making it convenient for a customer. I think actually the flashing lights and the sliding things on the screen, they're probably less important than making a super simple, super convenient experience for your customer. And that's what the trick is. And that's what banks ostensibly target more and more with their in their digital transformation initiatives. And Dilshan kind of highlighted this around how can we centralize our processes. It's about creating efficiency. It's about picking areas which we can outsource. And ultimately, all of that is in response to changing market dynamics. I think for me, it's not a very specific answer to your question, but it's definitely my honest opinion that, you know, that there's lots of different ways you can tackle that problem.
But Dilshan, we have a question from the audience, very relevant to countries like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. So the question is from Bangladesh. How do you deal with challenges of reduced employment as a result of digital banking or going digital?
That's a really good question, and probably the question that is thought of most when you use the word digital transformation, right? And Sri Lanka or HNB was no exception. So one of the things we did when we embarked on this journey is to really engage very closely with our staff as well as the unions. And this question used to keep coming up, or this was their biggest danger or worry. And what we figured out was that for sure, if you are going to be transforming your business, you don't need that many staff. But having said that, as a bank which has 5,000 staff, the simple mathematics will tell you that natural attrition would ensure something like 5% of our staff would be leaving each year through retirements, very few through resignation, and so on. So the conscious decision that we took was that on one side, we said we are not going to recruit. On the other side, we are not going to replace the staff that leave, and then back ourselves to manage with the increased efficiencies and the productivities that come through as a result of the centralization efforts. So I feel a transformation exercise of this nature need not bring in the wrong kind of headwinds. You need to think of it in a long-term perspective. And if you are successful, if you are truly successful in your transformation, natural attrition will take care of the issue, because even if you work the numbers out, at 5% attrition year after year, you're probably losing in 5 years 20% of your staff naturally, right? Seamlessly. But the challenge for you is to see whether you can actually up your productivity and your efficiencies to be able to manage without. So that's really the challenge that we took on ourselves. Rather than create the headlines in a traditional bank of our nature, which would have really stifled our change efforts if we were to look at compromising on our staff, or making some of our staff redundant. That would make a big challenge. And the other aspect is, when we did recruit, majority of our recruitments come in terms of outsourced contract staff, which gives us a level of flexibility that is necessary in terms of managing that whole exercise.
Thank you, Dilshan. And a question to you, question from the audience from PBCom. If you were to pick 3 things that a bank should address to overcome digital fatigue, what would that be?
If I was to pick 3 things for a bank to overcome digital fatigue, strong vision. Yeah, everyone has to have an objective. I think to the point that we just raised before, we have to embrace our employees as our biggest asset. It's no good to have a strong vision if everyone doesn't buy into it. And the third thing is, it comes back to technology, I think. Banks increasingly are reliant on technology. And I think that for me, to have the right systems in place, in particular, to make your staff's lives work better, these are the things that will help your business transcend all these change agendas over the next 5, 10 longer years. Everything else is important, but those are the key building blocks, I think.
If I can just add, I fully agree with Nick, particularly on the first 2, but my third would probably, not to celebrate too early, to have a longer term approach towards looking at initiatives. So you need to celebrate quick wins, no doubt about that, but it's, whether it is analytics, whether it's data, whether it is centralization, you need to really persist and refine, tweak, improve to get the value over the long haul. You cannot expect, and many people, embrace digital transformation thinking that they can achieve quick results.
Just one question from the audience. One last question from the audience before we conclude with a few comments. So the question is from Sri Lanka, Rajita Disanaika. The disruption caused by digitalization can create or destroy significant value for banks, depending on which stage of the digital transformation journey the bank is and how well they respond to customers. Other than COVID, which wore the hat of a CIO in many banks, what are the other instrumental factors that banks can use to really improve digital experiences to their customers? As a result of the evolving behavior of customers, what are the tools or techniques should banks use to really improve the way they deliver experiences to customers? That's a question from Rajita.
So my response there would be to say that, you really need to understand the customer's expectation, what is really their lifestyle. I think banking has been a laggard compared to a lot of other industries, whether it's music, whether it's a newspaper, whether it's mobile phones. Banking industry has been a laggard in terms of digital transformation. We are probably the slowest as an industry to really embrace. So I think the reason for that is we need to think in terms of the journey of the customer. So as Nick said, how can we enable a credit card or a personal loan digitally? How can we get people to onboard on an account, open an account, uplift a FD, close a fixed deposit, open a fixed deposit, again, without having to visit a branch? The entire experience, omni-channel, digitally, how can you make that happen? Ultimately, there are 4 transactions that account for maybe 80% of the bank transactions. And that is, as far as HNB is concerned, account opening, applying for a personal loan, applying for a credit card, applying for a, uplifting or opening an FD. So these 4 transactions, how can you make the whole process digital without people having to write a single piece of paper, visit a branch, but engage with people, be able to recognize the customer non-face-to-face, identification of the customer, that whole process, how do you digitalize it? If you do those four, then you account for 80% of the transactions in a bank. The rest of it, there's a lot of other work that needs to get done. But I think it's about really focusing on things that really matter and really finding solutions on those things. Sometimes you get distracted with so many different initiatives coming through, a lot of noise in the marketplace in terms of what digital transformation is about. But if you can focus on the few things that matter to customers and, to an extent, visualize their journeys and be able to find solutions for them, then you found the solution. Easier said than done.
I have one last question for both Nick and Dilshan as concluding comments. But before that, let me quickly summarize what we spoke today. I like the power opening, Nick. Every bank wants to change, but not all banks change. And we realize that to and from the leadership and skilled people at all levels of a bank is absolutely crucial in implementing and driving change in culture, delivering digital leadership. The business model becomes that much more relevant. Dilshan, first time I heard, moving from branches to showrooms, very interesting to know that from H&B. Enabling marketing and sales and advising units with digital interactions at the show. Moving back office functions from the branches to the center, very interesting to know. Freezing headcounts and opening of new branches for 4 years, very interesting to know. We can also see increased patterns of product sales via digital channels than conventional channels. And this is obviously bound to increase significantly over the coming months and years. The question is your bank ready to embrace this change? How people dependent is your interaction with consumers today? And what can banks do to actually change that? In conclusion, one last question, again from the audience. If you can give me quick answers, Nick and Dilshan. We are in a state today, nobody saw COVID coming in about 2 years ago. Whether we liked it or not, we had to change, we had to embrace all the behavioral aspects of COVID in terms of how consumers want to interact with banks. Fast forward 5 years, right? How do you think digital bank will look like in 5 years? What can we do as banks to prepare for the unknown in the future? COVID was unknown in the past. Not very sure if all banks were prepared for it. But in order to prevent a future of unknown or uncertainty, what does bank need to do? What do banks need to do now? And what does digital banking look like in the next 5 years? Over to you, Nick and Dilshan, and we can conclude the session from there.
I'll go first. Pretty simple for me. I think maybe not 5 years, but definitely sort of a little bit longer than that. Mobile will be the predominant channel with which your customers engage with you. I think that regulators off the back of COVID are going to remove the roadblocks, like markets that don't have eKYC allowed as part of the regulations. That will go away. In terms of the feature function, it's not going to be that different. Banking will still be kind of the same. There will be more around embedded banking, so making banking a seamless part of a customer's life. But I think ostensibly, don't expect it to turn into something completely different. It will still be a little bit more the same. It will be far more prevalent. It'll be more intertwined into people's lives, and convenient is my answer to that.
Dilshan, thoughts from you?
My comment would be to say that banks will better watch out, because there would be fintechs, IT companies, internet companies coming particularly into the payment space, aggressively coming in. So we need to watch our game. And I think in the next 5 years, digitalization of the entire customer journeys are there to stay. Banks have to be able to adapt and be able to really serve the customers by ensuring that the whole process is paperless, checkless, cashless, and completely digital. And really up our game on the cybersecurity front, because that's an important area. You can't take the trust that customers have for granted. there will be a lot of challenges coming on that front. That's an area that all banks need to invest in to ensure safety and security in the cyberspace.
Thank you, Dilshan. Part of the session by Nick mentioning that all banks want to change, not all banks want to implement change. And we end the session with Dilshan saying, all banks need to watch out. We need to watch our game into the future. With that, we've come to the conclusion of our session. I want to thank Nick and Dilshan for sharing some perspectives, your experience and your insights. More importantly, I also want to thank the audience who's been nice enough to be with us for the last 1 hour. So we've had close to 100+ people joining us. Thank you for the organizers. Thank you to the Asia Bankers Association as well as Temenos for hosting this event. Thank you. Let's meet up again and discuss more pressing topics relevant to the banks in Asia. Thank you. Goodbye.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.